Hey, hey. Hi, animal allies. I'll wait for a minute or so as folks start to join us. And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time. We appreciate that. How is everybody? What's happening in your part of the world? As I always ask, got any good news or wins this week or so? Please go ahead and share those in the comment section because curious minds want to know. So welcome to another AAC Activist Chat live stream. Today, I am joined by Gail Eisnitz, author and chief investigator with HFA. She investigated the meat industry and has quite a story to tell, as outlined in her new book, Out of Sight. So my name is Michele Granberg, and I'm your host tonight. For those new to AAC, AAC was created to help activists become effective by equipping them with the tools, community, and resources they need to boldly participate in our global animal liberation movement. Founded in 2020, AAC offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. You can apply today to become a mentor or mentee through our website. Plus, we are more than a mentorship program. We offer free educational live streams and online trainings. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale, in-person, collaborative activism events around the country. AAC is a support system and resource designed to empower grassroots activism from A to Z. And just a reminder, it is time to register for our New York City Fur-Free Weekend, November 27th through the 30th, 4 days of action. And we'll put the link tree so you can register in the comments. So, as we go on now to our guest, as chief investigator for the Humane Farming Association, HFA, our guest, Gail Eisnitz, has documented violations against animals by visiting animal operations, befriending workers, drafting extensive affidavits, photographing and videotaping crimes, and then fighting tooth and nail to get those crimes exposed and prosecuted. She put her findings in her first book, Slaughterhouse, The Shocking Story of Greed, Neglect, and Inhumane Treatment Inside the U.S. Meat Industry. Her latest book, Out of Sight, An Undercover Investigator's Fight for Animal Rights and Her Own Survival, is a memoir of her harrowing experiences. She is recipient of the Albert Schweitzer Medal. So we are in good company and are going to learn a lot. So welcome, Gail.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Great.
What a nice introduction. Thank you so much.
Did you like it? It's all true.
Thank you.
Really looking forward to having you here. So having read most of your book, and I didn't get to read all of it, and I plan to, but my thoughts, one that stuck out is I was really struck by how well written it is. And I mean that. And it is, I mean, it's shocking. It's grim at parts. It's disturbing and heavy and important, momentous and intense. It makes the reality of factory farming impossible to deny, we hope. And it's a true call to action for our humanness. Like, is this the world we want to continue to live in? Is this really the world that we are giving a thumbs up to? Not in my book, not in your book at all. It's a serious subject, but should not be overlooked. So at the, after Gail and I speak for a while, folks, of course, we're going to open up and welcome your questions, but hold on to your questions for a bit. And when you do ask, please do keep them on topic. We appreciate that. But I have tons of questions. So let's start a little bit in the beginning, which is what led you to investigate farm animal abuses.
Well, It all started with a letter I received from a whistleblower, a USDA employee down at a slaughterhouse in Florida, which was the largest slaughterhouse in the Southeast. It killed cattle. And he was not a USDA meat inspector. Meat inspectors are charged with enforcing the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. He was an animal health technician. He was there to test cattle for brucellosis by taking blood samples from them. And the cattle were, of course, supposed to be dead by the time they got to him, where he would take a sample of blood from them. And he wrote me an anonymous letter, well, sort of anonymous. He put his return address on the envelope, which was very helpful, to tell me that the cows were still fully conscious as they were having their heads skinned. And so I was able to figure out who the letter was from. I went down to Florida. I documented the violations very comprehensively, and he was fired for whistleblowing, although he had gone to every level of supervisor at USDA to get the situation rectified. He had gone to his member of Congress, he'd gone to the Veterans Administration, and he went to numerous animal protection organizations, and I was the only one who responded. So he lost his job, and I talked to many plant workers and other brucellosis testers and corroborated his findings. And of course, we took the USDA to court under the Whistleblower Protection Act, and we won him his job back. But interestingly, part of the lawsuit required the USDA to investigate his claims, and they did that. And the plant mysteriously, it was scheduled to expand production, and it mysteriously went out of business. And then the USDA issued its findings of the plant, and the findings said it was a wonderful plant, perfectly operated, no problems with live cows being skinned, and it was a glowing report. But in the meantime, Timothy Walker, who was the whistleblower, started me on my journey, and I decided to look elsewhere to see what else was going on.
What a pivotal role he played. It's almost like meant to happen. Imagine, I mean, maybe your path would have led you anyway to farm animal abuses, but hard to imagine if he'd never reached out, where we'd be today. But, like what is a whistleblower? And like what would you ever recommend to anyone to be a whistleblower? If someone who's watching this was in a position where they could, what would be the caution that you would offer them, or the suggestion that you would offer them?
Well, I think we did everything right. He was a whistleblower. He shed light on violations of federal laws. And even though he lost his job for a time period, we were there to sue the government and get him his job back. I would say always blow the whistle, because if violations are occurring, they need to be stopped, especially when it's in violation of federal or state law. And this was both. So I'm a big supporter of the Whistleblower Protection Act, and those who use it to expose atrocities that are going on against farm animals, or any other atrocities that are going on.
Yeah. I'm glad there are some protections, of course, because we want people to stand up and do the right thing. So now that you've sort of mentioned the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act, who is supposed to enforce it, and why is it not being enforced, or is it no longer enacted?
Well, it was passed 67 years ago, and it requires federal meat inspectors, the people who inspect the product, all the heads, viscera, and carcasses of animals. The viscera, body parts, and the carcasses of dead animals. It requires them to enforce the act. It requires that animals be rendered unconscious, be handled humanely and rendered unconscious before they're bled and butchered. That's the point of it. And as I said, it was passed 67 years ago, but it wasn't until an article appeared on the front page of the Washington Post in 2001, which exposed my findings, that it was funded. It was zero budgeted for all those years. I think it was like 43 years it had no budget. So they had this great law on the books that had no budget for enforcement. So it was pretty worthless. So fortunately, the Washington Post did that expose, and members of Congress were outraged, and they immediately appropriated money to enforce it. And now sadly, I've been saying for years that there should be full-time inspectors stationed in the areas of the plants where the animals are being stunned. But unfortunately, they have what they call verification procedures, which are what I call spot checks. Inspectors are told to go to the stunning area at a certain time and observe what's going on. But that doesn't always work because personnel in slaughterhouses, workers, have handheld radios, they whistle, they have code words to say that the inspector is in the area. And the other problem with it is that less than 3% of USDA's budget for meat inspection goes to humane slaughter enforcement, which is crazy since the animals are the beings that fuel the entire system. I think it's like 2.5% of the federal meat inspection budget goes to enforcement of the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act.
Wow. Good gracious. This is just another area where we shake our heads and there just is always this cover up and corruption, which I know you have worked really hard to expose a lot of that. And are cameras at all required?
I think some plants may have cameras, but
it's not part of the act. It's not part of what's required through that act. Yeah. Right. So, as we talk about this and we want to put the animals front and center as they are the victims here, throughout the book, you describe how the cows and pigs were still alive as they come down the line for processing. And you also use the term speed line, which I guess is a term that is used. So maybe you could define that so folks know. And you describe how they were thrashing and bellowing, and you're quite descriptive, but I found not overly descriptive. Like you were concise, you were descriptive, yet didn't overly use too many words. You were pretty concise because it is graphic, but it is also compelling in terms of how you write about it in the book. And I will say it pulled me into the moment, and I felt like I was there. I imagine that was on purpose when you wrote it, so that you could evoke emotion and evoke empathy. And I knew I was feeling just an iota of what the animals are feeling. So how did you decide how much to describe, to what extent, and how much did you leave out? Did your publishers guide you, or was that more your decision?
Oh, that was totally my decision. My publishers were great. They just trusted what I did. They were just terrific. This book represents the tip of the iceberg. It's just the very tip of the iceberg about what's going on in slaughterhouses and factory farms. And as far as line speeds go, I'll just give a little background that line speeds are so fast in these plants because in the past few decades, thousands of small to mid-sized slaughterhouses in the United States have been forced out of business by these huge mega plants, which kill millions of animals a year. So the line speeds in these plants, the speed at which the animals are stunned and killed, is so fast. I'll just give you a few examples. For hogs, the line speed is 1,106 hogs per hour. That's one hog every 3 seconds. And I've been saying for years, you got to slow the lines down. You got to slow the line speeds down. So what happens? The last two administrations decide to increase the line speed. They've increased it now to whatever speed the industry wants. There's no longer a line speed requirement. They can go as fast as they want. So that's really, really troubling. One hog plant I visited slaughters 35,000 hogs a day. I mean, you couldn't disassemble 35,000 toasters a day, no less slaughter 35,000 hogs a day. But, and then there's poultry, which are exempt from the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. And the speeds that they're eviscerated at was 140 birds per minute. And now it's going to be 175 birds per minute. That's 3 birds a second. So it's kind of out of control. It's like that fast. You can't have downtime because if there's a problem and you slow the line speed, you lose thousands of dollars. So the line doesn't stop for injured workers, it doesn't stop for contaminated meat, and it definitely doesn't stop for slow or uncooperative animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this is the consequence of the high demand of meat and eggs. And when you're saying that, like those numbers, each of those are individuals. That's how we think of it. That's not how they are thinking of it like they're toasters. How many toasters are we getting through and down the line? And how can we make that faster? And I know in a lot of the interviews you did with slaughterhouse workers, and a lot of them were so open about it, right? They were really open, and they would blame a lot of the blame they would place on the line speeds. Not my fault. Yes, of course, they're still alive, these animals, because of the line speeds.
Yeah, I talked with workers and meat inspectors who spend a combined total of 3 million hours on the kill floor, and without exception, they all said that they either engaged in or observed animals being strangled, live animals being strangled, beaten, boiled, skinned, or dismembered while fully conscious. So that was pretty much standard. Yeah, they were very open with me, but it wasn't in a way that they were blaming the line speeds. They were blaming management for allowing such ridiculous line speeds. And they were very open because they were sick of cutting the throats of live animals and watching them go into the scalding tank fully conscious. Or they were sick of dismembering live cows and watching them go down the line trying to right themselves and bellowing and stuff like that. They were so sick of it that they felt it was like the floodgates opened, and they were really, really happy to be able to talk about what was going on inside these operations.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about the slaughterhouse workers, but before that, we talk about that. I also want to say to folks that I know this is hard to hear, but please don't click away, because this is really important and helps us to be better activists, more informed and more empathetic in that way. So, I mean, Gail, it seems like, all of us are on the internet and we're on social media. There's more footage than ever. And I guess that's probably because we have these camera everybody's got, right there when they're working. But at the same time, you confirm in the book, as you said, that what we've all seen and heard in the footage is accurate. And in fact, it's worse. So you did a lot of the yourself, right? You did a lot of the undercover video and photos, but where else is it coming from? And did you submit the footage when you were trying to get them prosecuted? And what is the source of the footage, if you know, like in documentaries and on social media? Like, how is that sourced? How does it become public? Do you have any idea?
I don't know about the footage other than that which I got. And a lot of the footage that I got, I didn't take myself. Some of it I did, but most of it was through workers who were willing to use cameras inside slaughterhouses, which was really hard because their pants are searched to make sure they're not stealing meat, and their lockers are searched to make sure they're not stealing meat. And so it was really hard to get undercover videotape inside slaughterhouses. And when we did, the slaughterhouses, instead of worrying about the fact that the animals were being skinned and dismembered while fully conscious, they worried about the fact that their security had been breached and that their workers had gotten videotape. That's what they were.
That's what they're concerned.
Zeroed in on. Yeah, that's what they worry about. But I don't know. I just think that we're getting all sorts of video from all sorts of places, and it's confirming what I write in my book, that what I write is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead. It's important to mention, I think, if it's okay with you, for me to mention that the book is not just a documentary or an expose,
Yep.
but it follows a journey that I was on. Is it okay to talk about that now?
Sure. You want to talk about that now? That would be great.
Yeah, a journey that I was on. I have a very rare, and at the time for 60-something years, very mysterious visual processing problem, which makes it really hard to do a lot of the stuff that I did. And so the book follows my efforts to get to the bottom of that, and my visits to many, many doctors at teaching hospitals and places like that across the United States. And people have said, the Amazon reader reviews are great. People say that the book reads like a thriller. I'm looking at one right now. Find this book. This book reads mostly as a thriller, a suspenseful medical mystery woven into the tale of Gail Eisnitz. And then she goes on to say, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then she says, you will not be able to set her life story down. So I just throw that in now because I don't want people to turn away thinking, oh my gosh, it's just a litany of horrors. Right. It's not. It's not.
It's not. And that's also beautifully done and deliberately as well. And I noticed that too. I really appreciated the back and forth. It was almost like when the graphic stuff became too much, you change over to something beyond that, more about your journey and some of the less, more factual, informational things rather than the really difficult things to hear. But it was so seamless how you wove in your own internal experience of pain and the juxtaposition of the animal's pain. It was very effective, and it occurred to me, like, both, because they were so parallel, like, both are deserving of our empathy. You are deserving of our empathy. The animals are deserving of our empathy. But can you talk about, like, how the deliberateness of that? Because and one example is you talked about the scalding of pigs in the boiling water. And then you referenced soon after that sort of the scalding of your own lungs during treatment for cancer, radiation treatment. So that was really evocative.
Right. Oh, that's interesting that you took it that way. I'm glad you took it that way. That's great. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. You talk, and also on that, it really points out for certain, if we don't believe in the mind and body connection, your story really points to that, because even you say there's a relationship between stress and your physical health. including your visual disorder and cancer. And so can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a really bad boss at my former employer, and he was so bad that he wound up, well, this gives away a little bit of the story, but I'll give away a little bit. He wound up serving life in jail. But he was a really bad boss, and he would not let me expose my slaughterhouse findings. So I was so stressed out because thousands and thousands of pigs were going into the scalding tank alive, kicking and squealing. And we have video of this. And because some brave workers videotaped it for us. And I said to a colleague at the time, I'm so stressed out, it'll be amazing if I don't get breast cancer. And 6 months later, I had it. So there's definitely a mind-body connection there. The visual processing problem turned out to be a very rare neurological issue. So, and I did get to the bottom of that after 60-something years. But
people will have to read the book, though,
yeah,
to find out more. We won't say too much.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can give you some of the horrors that I encountered if you don't think it would be too upsetting for viewers. I don't know if you want me to do that or not. I don't want to scare people off.
It's up to you, but I would say you could give maybe one more moderate example.
Well, okay. And this is a real problem today. I mean, in addition to the brutalization of the animals in the slaughterhouses, this is a real problem. It has to do with the transport of animals in inclement weather, especially sub-zero temperatures. The hogs that were transported in freezing cold temperatures would actually freeze frozen solid like rocks, and they would be frozen to the side rails of the truck trailers, and they would have to use chains and things to rip them off the sides of the trucks. But they would have to use hoses with hot water to thaw them apart from each other so that they could chainsaw them to put them down the rendering hall, which is where they're rendered into fertilizer and things like that. But I mean, some of those hogs suffered extreme frostbite and would be in piles of dead frozen solid hogs coming off the trucks and would still be alive. And one worker told me the story of what it was like to see two frozen alive hogs on the top of a pile of frozen solid hogs, and how he took it upon himself to use his axe chopper, which I think is an axe, and hit him in the head and kill them because he said he would want somebody to do that to him if he was in that position. So, and then he told his boss about it, and his boss said, "Oh, that's fine." So this is a real problem with winter weather and transport of hogs in freezing cold weather. I mean, there's no consideration given whatsoever to their well-being, and
the trucks are wide open.
Yeah, they just
in all weather.
Solid.
You can't make this stuff up. It's just, and these are things nobody ever thinks about.
Right.
Every piece of it is just how much more horrible it can get. Now, I think you mentioned Smithfield in the book, right? And Smithfield was and is still one of the biggest hog farms, hog processing, but
yeah,
they did shut down some locations. I know that a lot of activists that I know have, protests and done vigils at Smithfield. So
right.
is there anything you can bring us up to speed about Smithfield?
I think they're still the biggest hog producer in the world, and they operate the fastest, biggest slaughterhouse for pigs in the world. And they're owned by China. They were sold to a Chinese company. So we're doing all this for a Chinese company, which is really messed up. But they're still really big. They did close some operations, but the other ones are still up and running.
And with that in general, is the meatpacking industry any different or better these days? Is it more regulated, less regulated?
Well, I've been focusing on factory farms lately, so my attention hasn't been with the slaughter industry, but I mean, when I was looking at it, they were dragging disabled animals with meat hooks in their mouths and anuses or cables around their necks. And they were sticking electric prods in their eyes and anuses and mouths and holding them there. And I can't imagine that this stuff is not going on. But I don't think it's as bad as it was because of that Washington Post story funded the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. So now they're actually meat inspectors who do their spot checks. So I don't think it's as bad as it was, but again, 3%, less than 3% of the entire meat inspection budget goes to humane slaughter. So I don't know how good it can possibly be.
How good, right. Yeah, absolutely. So hang in there, folks. We're going to have some more hopeful stuff, but this, kind of laying this out. Let's talk, though, if we can backtrack about the slaughterhouse workers, and then we'll talk about the media and law enforcement, in your experience as well, because, we do as activists often reference the slaughterhouse workers also being exploited. But, what, in your direct experience, are the conditions like for them? And not that you're a psychologist, or am I, but how do they dissociate themselves from their conscience, their empathy in order to do the job? I think there's some science behind violence at work leads to violence at home.
Yeah.
And after, when you described what they would say, I hated them. Of course, I felt like hatred, like pure evil for their egregious, sometimes they would enjoy, or they would take out their frustrations on the animals. And I don't want to give too much away, but I also know that they were in survival mode, right? And that they drank the Kool-Aid of normalization of violence. So there's that.
Some of them told me that they would go home and slap their wives around. Some of them told me that they had fantasies of slitting the throats of their supervisors. Some of them had served time in jail. It has to come out some way. That's why they were so open, because they were so happy to be able to talk about it to somebody who cared, because they were sick and tired of doing it. They were sick and tired of brutalizing animals. So I didn't really hate them. I sort of felt sorry for them. I mean, I shouldn't say I felt sorry for people who brutalize animals. I don't mean it in that way. But they were a product of the system, and the system is really messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if all those things are true, one doesn't cancel out the other. There's so many parts of this, and they have their own story to tell about their experiences. If each one of them wrote a book about those experiences. So, folks, we will take questions in a little while. Or if you have a question that's just directly related to what we're talking about right now, we could take a question perhaps. But let's talk about the media, as a component. They were not great. What did they do wrong? What did they do right when you were trying to expose this? What successes and what barriers did you encounter?
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about our successes when we get toward the end, but our successes in general, because we've had quite a few of them. Okay. But with the networks, the TV networks, it was impossible. They went out in the field with me. One of the ABC, NBC, and CBS all worked on this story with me. They went out in the field with me. One of them actually brought a correspondent to interview workers who were skinning and dismembering cows alive. And the workers were so brave. They showed their full face, 12 of them, saying that they're sick and tired of doing this to the correspondent. And we had our whistleblower protection attorney there to protect them. And then the story was killed. It was just killed. Nobody ever told me why. Just killed, as were all the network stories that I worked on. But HBO did a great documentary with us, which was really fantastic. This factory farm was kicking old sows, not old, they were probably young, but they were spent, and they were culling them, and they could no longer be productive, so they couldn't necessarily walk, so they were kicking and hot-shotting them out the barn door, throwing them off a 4-foot ledge onto a pile of other hogs in freezing cold, and then they were making them watch as their fellow sows had a chain fastened around their neck. The chain was attached to the tines of a front-end loader, and the front-end loader fork was lifted, and the sows took 5 minutes to suffocate under the weight of their own bodies. And we got that on videotape, and HBO did a fantastic documentary, and it aired 19 times in 1 month, and then it aired many more times over the course of a few years, and that was a great big success. So that's one platform that honored what's going on inside factory farms.
Yeah, the inconvenient truth. So, and they showed the footage, and
we took this was the one time when a prosecutor agreed to prosecute for us, and we took the perpetrators to court, and he prosecuted them, and the judge was a local farmer, and he did not have a problem with sows being strung up alive and hung. He did convict them of one minor misdemeanor for tossing piglets instead of placing them into bins. The perpetrators were throwing the piglets across the room into bins when they were being weaned. But so that was somewhat disappointing that the judge was a farmer and basically ruled in favor of the people who were hanging the poor sows. But another victory with regard to the media was the Washington Post story, because that took some doing. I had to literally beg a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter who had done a story on the hog industry in the past and won a Pulitzer Prize for it. And I begged him to expose what was going on in slaughterhouses, and he was kind of reluctant. But then I had another colleague who had done a story on slaughterhouse violations on the news, on a local news station, call the reporter from the Washington Post, and they were friends. And he did the story in the Washington Post, and that was a big success. So the press comes through in print and on platforms like HBO, but the networks, forget about it.
And your best guess as to why that is, not that there's one reason, is because
they all said it was too disturbing. They don't want people to change the channel. So, and also the commercials are by big meat companies, so I'm sure that has something to do with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to read you a comment from our comment section from an activist that I know and we know here. Gail, I'm an ex-slaughterhouse inspector from Canada. I always found it hard to share my story, but learning about you, giving voice to this, helped me along the way. Thank you.
Oh, that's so nice.
Testimony from a fellow, inspector sharing that experience.
Great. Yeah, we need
Yes.
whistleblowers. Yeah.
So let's talk about law enforcement and your encounters with law enforcement. What problems did you encounter with prosecuting the abusers? Because it was not a smooth,
It was the prosecutors are as captured by corporate agribusiness as the television networks are. And we worked with the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, who issued that false report about that slaughterhouse down in Florida, and that was ridiculous. We worked with the governor of Washington, who became involved in a case where thousands and thousands of cows were being skinned fully conscious, and we documented it, and he impaneled a task force to look into it. And then there was this huge cover up where they said we manufactured the evidence. We had videotape of it. So that was extremely troubling. And then we worked with attorneys general from 6 different states, providing them with tons of evidence of open and shut cases. In one case, we always provided still photos or videotape or worker testimony. In one case, we provided worker testimony, 800 pages of worker testimony. And they just ignored us. We ran full-page ads in newspapers in their jurisdictions to expose the cover-up. But still, they refuse to take action because they're captured by corporate agribusiness and they want to protect the meat industry. It's that simple. In fact, at this one hog factory that we did get closed down, it was going to produce 1 million pigs a year, and we were able to sue because it was on tribal lands. And we stopped its construction after only 2 of 13 sites were built. And then we looked inside those 2 sites that were operating. The most heinous things going on. And we shared that with the Attorney General of the state of South Dakota. And then after 6 months, they conducted an announced inspection where everything was changed for their inspection. And they announced that it was among the top well-run operations in the state. We had worker testimony. We had so much worker testimony saying that animals were being cannibalized. We have videotape of their faces eaten off. Their faces. They had what they called rugs. That was the remnants of cannibalized hogs. They were just hide and bones. That's all that was left. We had we had so much testimony. I mean, they were thumping piglets, which is standard practice, and it's unfortunately, sadly, American Veterinary Medical Association approved. That's where you take the piglet by the hind legs and roll it over your shoulder and smash it head first to the concrete floor. It's also called packing, which is the industry acronym for pound against concrete. And they were doing that, and they were beating bigger pigs to death with gate rods and wrenches and hammers. And one worker told us that he stood on hogs' throats to suffocate them. Another worker told us that he used a water hose, put it in a hog's mouth until its butt blew up. I mean, to kill them. They were doing all these things, and they were giving us worker testimony, admitting to doing these things. piglets were swimming in the waste pits and everything. And we had so much testimony. And then the Attorney General said it was among the most well-run operations in the state.
If that's one of the most well-known, I would really hate to see something less so. Horrific. Absolutely horrific. How upside down
the
world.
Yeah,
it's okay.
It's really hard to get prosecutions of animal abusers, farm animal abusers. We had the one prosecutor in the hog hanging case. He was wonderful. He prosecuted those people to the fullest extent of the law. It was just a bad judge that we got.
Yeah. Uphill battle here. They have, to get them their rights. And, the frustrating part, I'm sure that you felt time and time again. I don't know how you kept going and continue to keep going, that, the authorities, those who are supposed to protect, were looking away and doing nothing, even when presented with mountains of evidence and testimonies. I know you had to manage your emotions around that time and, sort of compartmentalize that. But did you ever feel angry, feel like giving up? I know in the book you talk about you turned it around and let those things fuel you to keep going, because you are the only one trying. You were the only one who knew. You're the only one who could help, who was aware of the suffering. And so you felt that huge weight and responsibility. But I wonder how you sort of, if you did find some balance around that.
I mean, that's the beauty of the book, because I evolved. Let's just put it that way. I evolved. I was very emotionally numb, which was a good thing because it enabled me to do my job. But over time, and with getting a diagnosis to my other problem that was haunting me while I was doing all this stuff, I've definitely learned self-compassion, which is a great lesson. And I'm starting to thaw a little bit, so that's really good. I was totally frozen. Totally frozen.
Yeah, out of just coping mechanism. Probably very automatic.
Yeah, it was automatic.
It was automatic. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't try.
Yeah.
I didn't try to keep from feeling, but you just have to put one foot in front of the other and do the next right thing. And when all these things are happening, you just have to do what's best for the animals.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely a model for that. I mean, everybody handles things differently, but for you to have seen as much as you've seen, and it's not a competition. We have all seen many things, of course, but it's just a great reminder. We must take care of ourselves. We must get help when we need the help, to reach out and to ask for help, because I know I felt the emotion just reading. My emotions were palpable just reading the book. And you talk about the personal impact, and that's the name of the book, really. So I wonder if it still keeps you up at night, or, any other suggestions that will help activists to cope with sort of this secondary trauma.
Geez, that's a really hard question. It doesn't keep me up at night. I don't just breeze through the terrible visuals that I see anymore. Now they affect me and they break my heart. But I don't know. I would not be the right person to tell people how to handle their feelings, because I was so cut off for so long.
Well, we can just recommend, in general, we know it's better to feel than not feel it to heal it. In general, you have to find that specific way for you. Everybody does, but better out than in. Get somebody safe to talk to and just find some tools,
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We welcome anybody who wants to share a bit of their experiences as it relates to this in the comment section. we'll read those or any questions related to what we're talking about, certainly as well. And so I want to kind of going back to the book, because the title of the book is Out of Sight. And it's such a great title because it so encapsulates the problem that these animals are so hidden in the shadows, out of our sight, behind locked doors, off the beaten track, like where these animal ag and slaughter houses are they're not in the middle of places where you would come across them. They're so far removed. And I think part of the problem we have as activists to try to engage people into veganism and talking about animal cruelty is it's so far removed from our day-to-day lives, right? You know, people will just immerse themselves back into their life and the things that they have to do, which is understandable. But talk about like it's manipulative and twisted, sort of, you know, the way it's all thought out, but by animal ag and the slaughterhouse industry, where these places, these large scale CAFOs or whatever they're called, right, are placed, and how hidden they are, and how, you know, not open to the public they are. So what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, they're not really so hidden, but they're not accessible because of guard shacks and locked gates and things like that. But they're out there. But talking about the sort of systematic way in which things are done intentionally, for some reason, depopulation comes to mind. It's sort of switching the subject here, but is it all right to talk about that?
You do.
Yeah, because it's so systematic and it's so nefarious and it's so intentional. And for people who don't know what depopulation is, it means it's the term that animal ag uses for the large scale on farm mass killing of animals who, due to disease or other unforeseen circumstances, such as natural or man-made disasters, can't be shipped to slaughter. Like they might get too big because of a temporarily shuttered slaughterhouse from COVID. The pigs got too big, so they had to kill them. You know, and the way in which they do it, according to I'll just give you the American Veterinary Medical Association definition of depopulation. It's the rapid destruction of a population of animals in response to urgent circumstances with as much consideration given to the welfare of animals as practicable. That's a big loophole, as practicable.
Yeah, that's like so subjective.
Yeah, so it's still going on. Avian influenza is still a huge, huge problem. And the way that they depopulate birds and the way they depopulate pigs during COVID was to use ventilation shutdown plus, which probably a lot of people are familiar with by now, where they seal up the barn inlets, shut off the ventilation system fans, and heat the barn to triple digits, and maybe pump in added steam. And the animals literally bake to death. And I think, I'm not sure what the death toll is right now of poultry because it's been rising in the last few months since the book came out. But it's got to be 180 million birds that have been depopulated. And
wait, in what time period?
Well, since it was 150 million when I published the book in May,
okay,
and it's probably about 180 million now. But 180 million birds that are subjected to ventilation shutdown or water-based foam, which is firefighting foam, which is sprayed into the barn to suffocate or drown the birds, or pigs. It's so heinous. It's so systematic. It's so
right.
It's so
right. People sitting in boardrooms making these decisions, talking about this, like this is how we operate and this is how we do business. And I mean, the cruelty aside, even, which we're not really putting it aside, but also the grossness, the absolute gross and disgustingness of what's happening before, during, and after. Like, what happens to the waste, which I will put in quotes, the bodies. Like, where can that possibly go?
Yeah, well, it's composted or incinerated or things like that, but it's just so shocking. It was 1 million pigs during COVID that were subjected to ventilation shutdown because, for goodness sakes, they might get a little bit too big to be processed, to be slaughtered. So it's just
crazy human egos, just out of control.
Yeah.
So we have a question that sort of brings us, taking a breath away from that for a moment, which is from Alicia. And she just asks, did talking about it help you heal?
That's a nice question. Writing the book about it helped me heal.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too, along the same lines, like putting it in writing, and did it feel like an exorcism a little bit? Did it feel like a release, like cathartic?
Yeah, it was
Writing a book and talking about it?
It was very therapeutic to write it because it was like, yay, I don't have to hold this stuff in anymore. I can share it with people who can do something about it. It was really great. And also writing about my visual processing problem was very therapeutic because now that I know what it is, for many, many years, as you know from reading part of the book, since nobody could help me figure out why I saw the world it was like having dyslexia of the world. It was very, very scary, very scary. It was like looking in a funhouse mirror. It was really scary. And since all the doctors I went to said, there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine, I started blaming myself, thinking that it was my fault. So when I got a diagnosis finally 3 years ago, it was like amazing. It wasn't established in the medical literature until 10 years ago. So that's why it took so long to get a diagnosis. But anyway, yeah, all of that plays into the answer to that question because it's very therapeutic to write about it and let people know factory farms and slaughterhouses, and inside my head too.
Well, to know that you were going through all that alone, if you were just going through that health, adventure of trying to figure out and getting an answer. And I think I'll give away, I know in the book it said you saw about 100 doctors over time, about 100 different doctors, but I'm sure there are people out there who can relate to just getting a diagnosis itself is like this liberating feeling. Like, I'm not crazy. It's not in my head. It's in my body. And there's a name for it. Like that alone, I'm sure that was helpful. And then releasing the shame around that because it's not your fault, and turning that around, talking about it, and probably getting lots of support. And people are going to support you now, even more so, reading the book and relating to it. But you kept going, even though simultaneously health issues and all that you're confronted with, with the animals. Honey, Gail, you're stronger than you know. I hope you know that. And I know I read some of the testimonials and stuff, and people call you a hero. They call you just really brave. And I will fully agree with that. And I don't know how that is for you to hear. I want you to hear it and let it in. We're not talking about it from like this ego place. I know you're not saying like I'm better than, but humbly, really, I do want you to sort of let that in. But how, like, do you ever think about like, I put my place in this movement. I have a place.
Well, when I wrote my first book, Slaughterhouse, it got a resounding response. I mean, it was really amazing. People wrote to me from all over the country, and it was pretty exciting. And no, I could not take it in. I have all these letters. I saved them. And now if I look at the letters, it's like Wow, they said that? That's so nice. But back then I was so shut down and so blaming myself for my problems that I was not capable of taking it in. Now, if somebody says something as lovely as you just did, Michele, I can hear it.
You can
I
hear
can
it.
hear it.
You can
Yeah.
hear it. You can no more walls or not as many walls, and you can really let it in and share and revel and celebrate in that. You know,
Right.
what was it all for otherwise? Even though we don't have all the results, that we would like to have, but still we want progress, not necessarily perfection, right? And
Right.
you really are, I mean, a big part of this. You're there with so many others, and we're all doing our part, trying to do our part. I know our activists are, but yeah.
I
And
mean,
so go ahead.
oh, I just, the only reason I want people to read the book is to find out what's going on. It's not an
Yeah,
ego. I mean, I hope it's not an ego thing. I just want people to know. And it's like such an opportunity for people to know what the tip of the iceberg looks like.
yeah,
So,
yeah. To document it, it's in black. Nobody can take this book away now. It's here. It's all in there. Whether people read it or not is their choice, but they will. People certainly will. So
yeah.
as a delivery way of delivering the information, certainly a book's still relevant in that way. Your Instagram is also very good. You have lots of good, ways of presenting, the issues as well as a vehicle. But I know that there are some writers out there, like people, we say in activism, find your niche, like find your skill, your talent, your way that you want to do activism. And for some people, that's writing. So, you know, so to all the writers who are also activists out there and the activists who are also writers, is there anything you would say to them, tips for or suggestions for channeling their activism into book form or into articles or however that might look, like you did?
Yeah. I'm not sure what to say about that. I mean, I first started out as a writer and then I became an investigator and
Mm,
was able to document what I wrote about. So that was really good. But articles are, people are, print media is great and they're willing to publish things about animal issues. Uh, as I said, the network's not so much, but print media is great. As far as publishing a book, it was extremely hard to get this book published. Even the big animal publishing house wouldn't touch it. I was able to get a really good publisher who's an anti-censorship publisher to publish it, and that was really exciting. But it's not easy to get a book published about animal abuse, but it's doable if you stick with it. If you stick with it, you can do it.
yeah. Yeah. If you feel strongly about it, if that's your contribution in that way, that's why we admire those who do follow that path
Right,
and don't give
right.
up with getting that book and that information out there. You know, I remember the days when books were everybody's main source of information before the internet and before social media. And people were clamoring for books. So it was just a different world, right? You remember that, right, as well? And now it's very different. Information is just at the click of
Yeah,
we
it's
just kind of click on it.
very different. When my first book came out, it was like everybody had to have it. Now, this book is just one of millions of books because there's so many books that are self-published and
Mm.
so many people are getting their information from other sources like you just said, but it's a different world than it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're taking more questions if there's some more questions. But mentioning the first book, then Slaughterhouse, does Out of Sight, because I didn't read that one, does Out of Sight sort of pick up where that left off, or are they just two completely different stories?
It actually includes some things from Slaughterhouse because Out of Sight
Mhm.
is a memoir, and so it's my life story. So I included some stuff from Slaughterhouse, and then it picks up from where Slaughterhouse left off. And looks at factory farms and does quite a bit on factory farms. Yeah.
But it's written differently because it's more just presenting a lot of the facts and your experiences. It's not the memoir piece.
Right. Yeah.
That's in the first book.
Yeah, it's an expose. It's a documentary. Slaughterhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you wanted to talk about HFA. We don't want to forget to talk about the Humane Farming Association. So tell us all about them. What, I know you're doing other forms of investigation and have other, all types of abuse you're looking at, right? So how big is that now, the organization? How big is the different investigations?
The investigations are so interesting. I'm promoting the book and doing investigations and a lot of litigation. I'll tell you a little bit about HFA. It does anti-cruelty investigations and exposés. It does national media campaigns on, like we did the national veal boycott, which we ran full page ads in all the major magazines and newspapers, and we've seen a drop since our national veal boycott began. We've seen a drop in veal production of 89%. And everybody knows that veal calves are raised in tiny crates for 5 months and are never allowed to turn around. And so that was an extremely successful campaign of Humane Farming Associations. We do legislation on behalf of farm animals, like working right now on the livestock indemnity program, which is I was watching TV one night and I saw that they said that 40,000 cows and calves had suffocated in the snow in New Mexico. And so I looked into it and found out that I thought that was odd that producers could sustain such tremendous losses. And I found out that they don't, because the federal government reimburses them 75% of the animal's market value for dead animals that die due to inclement weather, despite the fact that they don't have any shelter or shade or whatever the protection from the elements is that they need. So we got legislation introduced in Congress last session that required producers to have disaster preparedness plans before they ever receive any payment from any reimbursement from USDA. And we're trying to get that.
That was your campaign that got that added.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't passed yet. We're trying to get it reintroduced this session, but it brought it to public attention because nobody was even aware that producers don't have to pay any insurance premiums, but they get reimbursed anyway. So we do legislative campaigns like that. Humane Farming Association had the first federal hearings in Congress on farm animals and the first state legislation, because we've been around for 40 years. And we do a lot of litigation on behalf of farm animals, which is extremely interesting, testing new kind of working outside the box to get laws enforced. And so we do that. For instance, Pure Prairie Poultry, which is an organic poultry producer in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, decided to go out of business and leave 1.6 million chickens without any feed. So we are trying to get charges filed against them for animal failure to nourish and abandonment. And the last thing that we do is we operate the largest farm animal sanctuary in the country. So it's 7,000 acre refuge, and it's beautiful. And we have over 1,000 animals, and it's wonderful. So,
wow.
Yeah. So we do a lot. We've been around a long time, and we do a lot for the animals. And I'm so glad to be with Humane Farming Association because, as I said, my first employer is sitting in jail at my former employer.
What a difference
Yeah.
a day makes, right? From going from that situation and quitting there and moving on to a place where you're well used and appreciated.
Yeah, appreciated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're doing really amazing work. But is it also a nonprofit or not a nonprofit?
No, it's a nonprofit.
It is a nonprofit.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
located in San Rafael, California.
And is it okay to ask, is that where the sanctuary is as well, in that area?
No, the sanctuary is a few hours north of there in Northern California. It's so beautiful, and the animals are, it's like a paradise for these poor neglected animals.
Oh my God, it sounds absolutely like heaven for them. That many acres, that, I mean, being among their kin that way. I love sanctuaries for sure. They're small in comparison, but they are just they are family units. They really are, and safe havens, and what the world could be, which would be a world living side by side with our farm animals that way. Did you also investigate puppy mills, or did I read that in the book?
Oh, I did that at my former employer. Yeah, puppy mills and all sorts of different issues.
They focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a question here. Is it fair to say another level of abuse is the gaslighting and stonewalling by media, politicians, regulators, and the animal agriculture industry? So it's almost like they're asking, do you think we're being abused? We're being manipulated in addition to what the horrible abuse they're doing to the animals. They're just abusing all around.
We are, because we have a right to know, and that's what I kept saying. And when that Washington Post story came out, nobody wanted to cover this because they thought it was too disturbing and people would change the channel or whatever. When that Washington Post story came out, it was among the highest reader response pieces in the history of the Washington Post, just showing what I had been saying all along. People want to know this information, but it's being withheld from them. So we are being taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's being filtered. That we have a right to know and want to know. And if you ask and poll the average person, of course, and you present this, of course, I'm going to say I'm against this. I'm not okay with this, even though they are participating it from the consumer end of things, knowingly and not knowingly. But
it's like a giant conspiracy withholding this information from the public when the public has a right and wants to know.
Is it so? In addition to your, what you're doing goes hand in hand with activism, with street activism in all of its different forms and pressure campaigns. That's why we're doing this. But where do you see the role of activism, in tandem with investigators and undercover, exposés?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do go hand in hand. It's like I wrote the book as a tool for activists. It's like, use this book to do more activism, because activism is where it's at. Like we were talking before the show about your wonderful successes in the past 2 weeks. It's like you have to be fueled with information and documentation, and then you're able to use activism to stop these atrocities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To show up, to put the pressure on, to say, we know, we see you, we know what you're doing, and it's not okay. And we're here for the animals.
Right.
So excellent, in terms of doing your part. If we have any other questions, we'll certainly take those. But I guess I'll throw it, we'll wrap up then in a bit here. But Gail, is there anything else we didn't cover? Let's cover it now. Is there anything else that's really vital and important in this subject or in your experience?
I think we pretty much covered it. I have my little list here of things, and we didn't, other than the information about depopulation, I didn't talk much about
the egg industry.
Yeah.
So I've read your mind. I was thinking the same thing. We didn't. A lot of folks are familiar with that, but what might we, in terms of egg-laying hens and the meat industry? What do we not know? Because we know some. We've seen.
Yeah, I'm
what,
sure.
what do people? What do activists especially need to know about that?
Well, I'm sure everybody knows that 300 million male chicks are ground up or suffocated each year in the United States. That's
It
pretty.
bears repeating. It bears repeating.
Yeah.
Reaching someone who didn't know that. Male
Yeah.
chicks are considered waste products. They are ground up on the first day of life.
Right. And that 6 to 10 hens are crammed into a cage the size of a microwave, a large microwave, and that they peck each other in frustration, so they're DB. Everybody knows this. The one thing that really gets me is when they fall into when escapees from cages fall into the waste pits and get sucked down into the mire and are suffocated. But sometimes, every once in a while, you'll come across one whose head is still sticking out of the waste and is still alive. I mean, it's
That's a
just
nightmare.
it's
That's a
there's
nightmare.
no words. Yeah, no words.
Just put your. I want to save them right now.
Yeah.
It's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unbearable.
And then the beef industry used to take 5 years to finish a steer, and now it takes 14 to 16 months. And on these massive feedlots that have tens of thousands of animals, they often don't have shade or shelter, and that's a big problem, because then the livestock indemnity program kicks in when they die of heat stroke. They are fed. I don't think people realize this. Beef cattle are fed meal made from chicken feathers, poultry litter off the floor of poultry houses, dead pigs, and fish, in addition to soy and corn and everything else. But so that's interesting. And then
that's standard. Like, how did you? I just saw that on your Instagram, and my mouth dropped open too. Like, I had not heard that.
Yeah.
Like, parts of other feathers and litter, and parts of fish, and the cause of that mad cow disease was feeding cows to cows, right?
Right.
Well,
right.
that was a few years ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah, they banned that. And then I'll just talk briefly about dairy cows, because dairy cows used to produce less than 2 gallons of milk to feed their calves, and now they're forced to produce 6 to 7 gallons, and at peak times twice that amount. And they're so pushed metabolically so far beyond their abilities that they're culled at 3 to 5 years instead of the 15 to 20 year lifespan. And as far as and they suffer mastitis routinely. And at one huge operation we visited to deal with the mastitis, to deal with infected teats, they just took a razor-like device and cut off a portion of the nipple, which with no painkiller or no anesthetic or anything like that. It was just outrageous.
Standard practices.
Yeah,
standard practices.
And the male calves that can't produce meat, they're either auctioned for bob veal, which are killed within 1 to 30 days of birth for use in lunch meat and hot dogs and things. Milk-fed veal, where they're crated for like 5 months, or they're shipped long distances to become raised for cheap hamburger, or they're sold for rendering to be turned into tallow or grease or animal feed. Or what we found, which was fairly common at this humongous operation, I mean, this was standard practice, was they were left to starve to death, they were shot, they were beaten to death, they called it head bashing, or they were buried alive by the producer. So,
and this is across, right? This is not an anomaly. None of that.
No.
I want to remind people that you're saying this. It's not just, hyperbole, right? Or it's not just anecdotal. You are saying this because you've been told by the people who were there, credibly, and you've been there and you've seen it and you've witnessed it for yourself. And so people need to know.
Yeah.
People absolutely need to know. So we had a question come in that from Jeremy. What about death on a factory farm? In other words,
oh, he's talking about the HBO special.
Oh, the HBO special. Is that the name that you of the HBO that you were talking about? Because I was going to ask you what was the name of that, and can we still find it?
Yeah, Death on a Factory Farm. I think you can still find it. I would just Google it and see where you can watch it. It was really, they did such a good job on that documentary.
Okay, we'd love to recommend that then, have people find it and share it the way that other documentaries are shared. And I know that you're featured in the documentary a little bit, at least, talking about your experiences.
I'm not featured in that documentary. No.
Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah, that's something else we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So if there's nothing else that you want to share with our audience, is there any way that you can leave us on with some final words that are hopeful in terms of something positive that you've seen? In addition to we're having some wins, we are absolutely having wins, like any other progress that you can report on or any other call to action?
Yeah. We had progress with the National Veal boycott, as I said. We had progress with the Washington Post in terms of funding the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. We shut down what was going to be the third largest hog factory in the world. Our HBO documentary, Death on a Factory Farm, was produced. And the bottom line is Humane Farming Association stopped all the egregious crimes we documented. And we shut down a number of the operations we investigated. So that's really good. As far as a call to action, it'd be fantastic if viewers wanted to contact their members of Congress and tell them to support all livestock indemnity program efforts to have disaster preparedness plans for livestock before they're ever reimbursed a dime under the livestock indemnity program.
So that needs to be put in place state by state, you're saying?
No, that's in Congress.
That's in Congress now.
It's not.
So call your congressperson. Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been introduced, but it's been put in appropriations language and all sorts of stuff. So they should be aware of it. And it's soon to be reintroduced. It was in the last session introduced. And we just want...
Can you say it one more time, though, Gail? So maybe someone can put it in the comment section. What the call to action is to call your congressperson and tell them.
Call your congressperson and tell them to support reform of the livestock indemnity program to require producers to have disaster preparedness plans in place before they're ever given a dime of reimbursement under the livestock indemnity
to
program.
require that. It has to be documented.
On file and implemented.
And implemented for a while. It has to be tested out. You can't just say this, we'll do this. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work.
Right. It's all in the language of the bill, how it would be done. But the bill will be reintroduced shortly.
I do remember that incident you were talking about where all those cows were just exposed outside in a snowstorm and they died en masse that way. I mean, and now it makes sense. Like they got reimbursed. The farmers got reimbursed for that. There's no incentive for them to provide shelter.
Right.
Just awful. Just another layer of just absolutely abuse.
Right. And it's our
behavior.
Our taxpayer dollars. It's waste of our taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. We spent $500 million since 2008 reimbursing producers for millions of livestock and poultry that died because of inclement weather. So, okay, I'm done talking.
May they rest in peace. Awful, horrible. They're in a better place now. It's got to be, but absolutely awful. No, Gail, you are a wealth of information. that is so appreciative, even though you might feel like the gloom and doom person. I know you might feel that, like, that you're always bringing the bad news, but you don't, because you see the bigger picture here. And let's say I want everybody to visit Gail's website, which is gaileisnitz.com, yourname.com. And please purchase your book wherever books are sold. Certainly people can go over to Amazon right now and buy your book and buy an extra copy and give it away to someone else. It's really an important book. And I will tell you, I don't read a lot, but I read and I didn't want to put it down. And I'm going to finish it right away, because it really is that good, even though, it definitely will get your heart rate up maybe a little bit, but it will spur you to action. So thank you.
The ending is the best part. And also, I'll just mention, contact hfa.org and join Humane Farming Association.
Yes. Go to FHA. Thank you for that reminder. hfa.org. We've been talking for a while, but Gail, thank you. My humble and sincere appreciation for you and the legacy of your work.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you so much.
So as we wrap up, please register for our New York City Fur Free Weekend, November 27th through 30th, 4 days of action targeting the fur industry. Hopefully we can put that again in the comment section. And also please donate to the Convergence, folks, if you can, and maybe we could drop that link as well. All your donations will go towards the expenses of the Convergence. And for as little as $2 a month, please consider becoming a patron by finding AAC on Patreon. Your donations allow AAC to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee or want to get involved, please visit our website. Please hit subscribe here on our channel, smash that bell, and give us a like. And my final message is about empathy. We are in a crisis where apathy is crowding out empathy. Make it your mission to cultivate empathy every day. Empathy fosters understanding and connection. It sparks compassionate action. It builds bridges, and it resolves conflict. Empathy is the backbone of this movement. So until next time, AAC signing off.